Welcome back to The Whole Person Revolution, a podcast of Comment Magazine. I'm your host, Ann Snyder, and today I'm going to invite you to join me at a reservoir that has not only nourished me and guided key arrows of my own vocation, but has gradually changed, I think permanently, the way that I see others, see the neighborhood, see pain, see hope. That reservoir is a person, and his name is Mack McCarter. Mack founded Community Renewal International, an organization based in Shreveport, Louisiana, that now, over 30 years ago, noticed a new kind of disintegration disturbing our social fabric, a level of fracture and human isolation that spelled only despair. With the catalyst of Mack's relational insight and boundary-crossing steps, Community Renewal gradually built a robust science of human relations, a social technology grounded in everyday care in everyday neighborhoods. A Renaissance intellect with a pastor's heart, Mack has a book coming out this fall that describes that social technology and the story of community renewal titled How to Remake the World Neighborhood by Neighborhood, published by Orbis Books. For now, I've invited him on here not only because he's a social pioneer who has figured out how to unleash the infinite reweaving of a community, but because he's modeled for me simply what it is to be a friend, always with humility, always with a twinkle. Mack, any hour with you is always a life-giving hour. Welcome to the Whole Person Revolution.
It's good to be here with you.
So I want to start at the very beginning with a simple question. Who taught you how to be a friend?
What a great question. And it is a whole group of who's, and it's almost like Whoville. I'm going to share with you what probably was a different world to you and to many of our readers. I was born in the 1940s, 1945, and before the end of the Second World War, and we lived in a neighborhood that had been constructed in the 40s during the war itself, and we had about 22 houses, small houses. That's where I was born and literally lived until my marriage, and my folks still live there after the marriage. Here's the other world. As soon as I can, my memory back to the age of 3, we didn't have air conditioning or anything. And of course, in Shreveport, Louisiana, I still marvel that we were able to breathe air and still be alive today because of the humidity and how hot it is. But it didn't affect us. But we would, in the morning time, we would literally, and even at the age of 3 to 4, the kids would just explode out of the houses in the morning, and we would spend the mornings together, then all go to eat lunch back at our houses, and then as soon as lunchtime was over, back out, and then supper time came, and we would have supper, and then in the evening we would be back out. And so imagine a neighborhood filled with kids, and of course I was one of the younger ones in the neighborhood, and really being a part of a whole group of kids with unstructured play every day during the summertime, and then during school, after school, and everybody got home, again, unstructured play. And that is literally where I learned what it meant to be friends. And we went through all kinds of things. There were the unwritten rules. You had to take up for the little guy. You couldn't bully, and we would have games in the evening, but we would just think up our own stuff every single day. And it wasn't every kid on the block, but across the street, a young guy 3 years older than myself I tagged along with them, and you literally learned um, what it was to be a social animal in that group. And of course, I've studied that since. And of course, one of the groundbreaking books on that is Homo Ludens. It talks about how critical play is for all cultures, and it isn't within the culture, but it is of the culture. And so, those of my generation learned what you had to do, or they're going to say go home. If you didn't play the game right, you weren't able to play. And so we learned to be together as a group and to watch out for one another, even though we had incredible internecine warfare. And that was it, you know.
So it was communicated very much through kind of rules that were intuited and felt in the context of these groups,
Yeah.
but it wasn't necessarily like verbalized. It just was behaved.
Right. But you had to, in order to be a part of the group, that you had to be a friend. And you learn those things. Of course, the consciousness uh, comes much later of what we must do to initiate friendship and how we can grow it. But
Yeah.
that was ingrained in us, all of us back. It didn't mean we didn't have fights. Lord have mercy, we
Yeah.
had all kinds of fights. But you know, uh, that was simply a part of the whole fabric. The worst thing in the world was to be excluded from the group when they would tell you go home
Yeah.
or we're
Yeah.
not going to play with you.
So what would you say was what was your first brush with difficulty in friendship?
Where I grew up, Ann, it was a sea of white folks. We were next to what had been a country club, and it had been taken over by the city. And way back in the 1800s, it was part of a plantation. It was a flat area, um, and next to some of the bios, and it was called Waterside Plantation. You could actually get on a riverboat at the end of my street back in those days and ride it all the way to New Orleans. And so there were 2 blocks of blacks that lived in shotgun houses. Again, this is uh, goes back. That's where the slave quarters actually were, and so they were surrounded. It was an island of blacks living in the midst of a sea of white people in a very, very segregated time. It was American apartheid. And I lived on the corner where we had a side street that went all the way down to that section. And it literally was an island. It was bordered by the golf course and then by all of the white folks. And so uh, my earliest memories were me being in bed while it was dark and hearing the kids from that section walk past my house. And they were, of course, on their way to school as a group. They had to walk about 2 miles to get to the bus in order to be bused all the way across town to their school. And then when they came home, they came home late, of course, because they had to get on the bus, and the kids in our neighborhood they were already home, and they had to walk then back through the park rather than down the side street because they would risk being set upon by some of the white kids and stuff. So my honestly, my experience in friendship, my parents had given me the gift through our faith that every single human being is precious. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and thank goodness that plumb line was there, but that plumb line also then meant that you could discern social injustice. I was too young to ever know that. But when I began to quote take up for the kids, um, and here was our group who were they were all my friends. It was our block and our street, and then to see them doing things to the black children, uh, you know, that was simply unconscionable. And it wasn't the goodness of my heart. It was the gift that my parents had given, and we had strongly placed within us, right and wrong and the rules of the game. You didn't cheat. You didn't do those things. You didn't play. And the rules of our game was that every human was precious. And here, they were going against it, and this was my
Mm.
group. And then to stand against them, which I did. I hadn't been in a whole lot of fights, but uh, I did get in a bunch, and I mean it's on quote unquote, and I did lose every one. I never won one, but
Mm.
that was the cause of that, and that was incredibly painful to to make that stand with kids that I loved, and to see this incredible ugliness come out. And so that is with me today, how a crowd of good people can change. Over and over that happened, and it was quite discouraging.
Thanks for sharing that, Mac. You're one of the more well-read people I know who keeps wears his learning lightly. And you've read broadly, you've read about the history of civilizations, and all of it is sort of wrapped around a deep care to understand kind of the invisible way in which we find communion with others. One thing I had hoped to answer as our magazine explored friendship was to sort of do a historical study, like how has it been understood in different eras, in different civilizational setups, political orders, and so on. What if friendship's nature is timeless, and what do you think has changed in different societies over time?
I think that we have seen through human history, the growth of the concept of friendship out of the necessity. When we came out of the forest, humanity did, and we came out on the savannah. If you got separated from the group, you died, period. In the early
Mm-hmm.
moments of our history that stretches all the way back in terms of humanity. And we now know we're hardwired to be connected to one another. We're hardwired for that. And so our consciousness, in one sense, has grown exponentially over the necessity of connection together, and finding the ways by which we can do that. We have gone from these little knots of human beings into growing those into major affinity groups, like the major religions, like villages, into city states, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, into a quote national consciousness. And so there have been the growth of affinity groups in every cultural milieu that we have, coming from those little bitty knots of connectivity. But consequently, along with that, has been the danger of affinity itself, because it is my group. That's always the seeds of our own destruction are implanted in every one of us, because we all have this drive for to take care of self. And when we put self over against the other, then either individually or by a group, we are unsuccessful in our quote in our own friendships, our own relationships, but we're massively unsuccessful in our group gatherings, because we literally end up pitted against the other. So you can see the growth of the consciousness of friendship, and we have, in one way, we have grown, but Anne, the human race we've never developed. We have had wonderful vision, of global, community now that we have moved into a literally a global arena, but we have never ever been successful in forming a societal group that literally has grown better and better and better and more whole human beings. It's almost like we reach an adolescence and then fall back into our hyper individualism and infantilism of me, myself, and I. Will strive on a societal basis and then always fall back. And there is the inevitable gravity of self that keeps us from leaving this atmosphere of self and going on to what we could be as the human race, where literally we can develop through friendship and only through friendship a global society that includes every single person in, quote, a friendship context. And so that might sound elusive, but it's actually not. I mean, it is that which is driving us, and honestly, it's driven my life to say, how do we make the whole world like our friendship? How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, let's get right into that, Mac. You have quite literally, as you just alluded, made friendship the great cause of your life.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more of the journey behind this? How did kind of friendship hit you like a light bulb, maybe the light bulb that could save the world?
Well, and we're verging on 8 billion people, and the one thing, all of my training was in pastoral counseling. I had the great good fortune to actually train under one of the founders of the entire discipline of pastoral psychology, Charles F. Kemp, and so that was the major thing to discover. You know, that a pastor, is nothing more than a physician of relationships. How we relate to God and how we relate to one another, and it's astonishing the probably the 16,000 hours of counseling that I did all was relationally based. I brought to the game of life this understanding when I began to look at the Bible relationally rather than doctrinally. That instead of starting with doctrines, you start with that which mobilizes all of us, and that is loving friendship. I mean, and when you do that, then it's an astonishing thing, because here is God walking in the cool of the evening, and the genius of the Jewish people, setting out the creation story, and he's walking in the cool of the evening with Adam, and which is a wonderful picture of friendship. And then, in essence, Adam says, "I want to do my own thing. I don't want to walk with you." And that there is the Adam and Eve of all of our hearts, where we reach a place to say, "Thank you, I can do it myself." And then the entire scripture is God seeking to walk together again with us. The entire story is of the Bible is that in ways of the prophets, Moses, Elijah, Abraham was the friend of God, and it culminates in the book of Revelation, and there is the Garden of Eden, and whosoever will, let them come and drink of the water of life, and that's the ending where we are together again. So consequently, here is this entire story, and what has motivated me when uh, is literally coming from my street and seeing the the preciousness of every human being and seeing the destructive consequences of dysfunction and self-centeredness is to say, the whole God's entire calling is that the world should be together, every human being, and to find and give ourselves to the way to do that. And so that happened to me at the age of 16. I committed my life as best as I could to this what we call the kingdom of God, the rule of His love for every single one of us, and it means that we have to continually think bigger, about love and about friendship. And so when I say that friendship is both the means and the end, but it's also the source. And so it Paul, in a wonderful way, says source, guide, and goal of all that is. That is, it is all wrapped up in that. And so, consequently, community renewal is simply a way to expand that, where we have an overarching faith that can be precious to every single human being and then to every affinity group. And that is where we, we have the faith that love works and love wins. And the means to this is purposeful friendship, that we're all in on that purpose. And no matter who you are, if you're living for that, we're in. And if you're not living for that, we're going to love you. And so that's kind of the whole shooting match to me of life itself. And I don't know any other reason to live on this planet than to have that as our meaning and as our goal, and to understand that that's the source of the power by which we live and move and have our being. That's kind of the overall thing, to stop and think that every human being on this planet, no matter where they're born, no matter what their quote affiliation is, we all can sign on to the faith. And it does take faith, because when you look at both the empirical historical evidence as well as the contemporaneous evidence, our faith is that love does work. That's a faith, and there's a lot of evidence that it may not and does not, and that love does win. And there's a lot of contemporaneous and historical evidence that it will not win. So we, by faith claims, we're going to live that love works and love wins. And every human being can have that faith and keep the preciousness of their own affinity group, but still join together in that faith. And then that puts us together. That's the thing that gives us, we're then a band of brothers and sisters. And to me, that's the whole purpose that Jesus spoke of when he set out to familyize the world, and to recognize that that's who we are. Well, you got me preaching, by golly. And what we've done, we've doctrinalized this friendship, and we have institutionalized fellowship, which is the koinonia of God. The fellowship is the fellows of those who have consciously said, we're going to love each other. And we're going to love each person, and we're going to love all people. And I can't touch all people, but all people can touch all people. And, together, if we join this cause, I think there are two major challenges we face on planet Earth. We have a lot of problems, but only two challenges. And the first is we got to take care of our mother planet. If we don't, it doesn't matter what we do if we don't do that. There is no lifeboat for the human race. So we have to take care of the planet. But it's going to take all of us united together We can't have 3/4 of the planet trying to take care of the planet and 1/4 of the planet continuing to foul the planet. And so consequently, the two challenges are we have to take care of the planet, and we must come together in a united way that includes all of us to take care of the planet. And we have the astonishing thing is, unless we come together in that second challenge, we cannot answer the first. And so, consequently, what is it that brings us together? And I think there are just two simple steps that bring us together, all under the name of what I call purposeful friendship. If we know we're in the same purpose and dedicated to it, we'll get to be friends like crazy, just exactly like they do in the Army and in the service. You join the same thing, and all of a sudden, no matter how you have diversity, you are one in cause. And so, those two steps to take are number one is individuals to consciously say, I will give my life and dedicate myself to care for each and every single human being. I'm going to consciously do that. Then the second step is critical, because if we stay there, then we stay isolated from one another in the power of our friendships. And so we're going to take the second step and join together in the cause of caring friendships. I'm going to join this cause. And by joining the cause and being visible by doing that, that's what we have to work out. That becomes the overarching faith that can bring every single human being together. And that overarching faith is we believe, and we're committing our life to the fact that loving friendship works. And loving friendship will, in the end, will win and take us past this gravity of self to the stars. So that's kind of what has mobilized me and motivated. I don't know any other reason to live, except for that. What are we here to do? To get famous and then die? Get rich and then die? And I've been at the bedside over 50 years of pastoring, where innumerable folks, both little children as well as the elderly, have taken their last breath, of consciousness. And in every situation, not one of them, a little kid talking about his favorite toy, or a businessman talking about the deals that he made, not one of them left the idea that their friendships and their relationships, that was the last thought and the last consciousness, that they had. And if it's that important, then we've got to take that and stretch it back to as Tillich called the eternal now, back into our lives and live that forward, that is what we're here for. It's not a dream. It has to be a reality, that an overarching faith that can enwrap and hold as precious all of our little faiths, and they're not little, I don't mean it like that, but can do that, is the faith that friendship, loving friendship, works. And it wins, and we can all, every human being can sign up for that.
Yeah. I would love to help our listeners with a few concrete principles or rules, as you call them. What are the rules of friendship?
We're kind of like fish that are born in the ocean. When they're hatched, they just start swimming. They're not conscious of the water until it gets a little bit polluted, and then they start thinking, "Hey, what is this stuff here?" And so, the thing that all of us, we really follow rules. We just don't think about them much. But if you have a friend, trust me, you have followed some successful ways that have brought you together with another human being. And so, just to illustrate some of those, is the first is uh, what do you share together in common? That's how we're going to connect. And we have various ways and of finding how we share in common. We're really not conscious, but it starts with our communication with one another. You have to follow the rules of communication. One is cliche conversation. You can say, "Hey, the weather's great," and if somebody is going to say, "I hate the weather," then you're kind of consciously going to maybe back up a little bit, but we have ways to begin to find affinity and begin to grow together. It's conscious communication for at a cliche level. And then we can move to share
Yeah.
objective thoughts. And so, in our communication, and of course, then feelings, uh, we share our feelings. And that's a whole dance that we have. And it's forever. Judy and I have been married 55 years, and we still, I mean, every day is cliche stuff. You still do that. You don't, the last thing I want to do is wake up in the morning and have some kind of deep theological or deep emotional discussion. At the breakfast table, I'll avoid doing that. It's so we do that. We can begin to move into a communication is essential, and understanding that and seeking to know the other, uh, and then what we share together. Again, uh, there are many, many ways that we can share together. We can share, all kinds of things, but that's a rule. And then, astonishingly enough, one of the rules of a relationship is that you will become disillusioned in your friendships. So and it won't happen
Mm.
just once. It's going to happen a lot of times. And I'm going to say something that sounds counterintuitive, but we literally grow in our relationships through our disillusionment. And the reason I'm going to say that is that all of us, self never leaves us. As long as we're on this side of glory, self is there, and self can even say, "I'm not here." And if you believe that, then I've got a bridge that I want to sell you. But we can be self deluded, which is what I mostly where I live my life. And so, consequently, self is there, and self sees a person, and they're unconsciously saying, "This person can really, really help me grow. I need this person." And so
Yeah.
the trick that gets us together. I need this person. They're going to help me. They make me feel good. They make me laugh. They make me have meaning, et cetera, et cetera. And then as we grow closer, then that person will mess up somehow. Oh my gosh, they're not feeding me the way that I need to do that. And sometimes that'll break relationships off. And this disillusionment, oh my gosh, they're not what I thought they were. They let me down, or just even little things. But then, if we can understand what forgiveness is the restoration of a relationship that has been broken in many, many ways. And that's where you consciously say, "I don't care. I like them so much. I see there's this deal, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to be with them because I see in them some wonderful things." Love is not blind. Love sees things that others don't see, that don't have the eyes of love and loving friendship. "Girl, I don't
Mm.
see what she sees in him." You know? Well, that's because you don't love him, and so love can see that, and that's one of the rules too that we don't really think about is that the 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 importance of forgiveness at every stage, because that's how we're going to literally grow through the disillusionment, and you grow through from better to from better or worse, and that strengthens the relationship that then becomes unbroken. And so we share together, we communicate together, we play together, all kinds of ways that we are building and growing the commonality that it becomes concretized in a friendship that will not be broken. And if we can have a normally, I always tell people a brick in a building only is mortared into six other bricks, but it's a part of the entire building. There are 10 million bricks in the Empire State Building, but each brick is just mortared into six other bricks. We normally have some real close friends. All of us will have, I hope all of us will have deep friends that to whom we share and stuff. But the amazing thing is if we can think of how we understand the rules of relationship, we can begin that process and expand that group, and almost exponentially. It doesn't mean that I've got 1,000 friends with whom I share the deepest of deep stuff. I have a handful, but I can grow the meaningful aspect of that by using the rules of a relationship and literally expanding that group. And so, and at various points, we're connected to the whole building by recognizing, and I go again, one of the fundamental rules is the recognizing that every single person is precious, every single person. And that's important. I know in Washington, sometimes you can't go a block without a person, if you're walking, needing some help. Well, I had a friend that I was walking with, and and that friend, we encountered someone who needed some help, and uh, we never are to walk past anyone like that. We're under command to give to those who ask. And my friend said, "What's your name?" And I thought, man, that's so important. So now I ask everybody, what's your name? And I introduce myself. And it is literally practicing the discipline of personhood, that everyone is precious. But those rules are there. We have to obey them. There's certain things we must say, and we have to give praise to one another every single day. We need it, and so we give certain things we must say and be conscious in that, and certain things we must do, and then and certain things we must not do, and certain things we must not say, and yet we're going to screw up every single time. And that's why forgiveness is one of the rules. We have to forgive one another. First Corinthians, everybody loves to talk about First Corinthians, and I do too. Because I always tell our team, we have to be the kind of community we're seeking the world to become. The means determine the ends. We have to be that seed and grow that seed into a whole loving community. And one of our rules is that we're gonna follow 1 Corinthians 13. Well, that's great. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. Love doesn't seek its own. Those are all wonderful. You read through those, and then you come to the part where it says, love always, love never. Well, I flunk because the one thing that I always do is screw up, always. And there's not a time where I can ever fulfill the condition of never. And I've said it 1,000 times. I'm old enough to go, I will never. And I've eaten that. I don't even know how many times that I've eaten. So therefore, we have to recognize that it's so critical that we can't do this thing. And therefore, we have to open our lives to the source of love. Loving friendship was here when I came on board, and it's going to be here when I depart. And this, we didn't birth this, and so therefore we have to open ourselves to that source that transcends us, that helps us to keep going and to keep patching up and to keep the bridges open, because we hurt and we've been hurt, and we just all need to do that, every one of us. It's one of the rules. It's so critical for us.
Are the rules of friendship different from the needed conditions, like the environmental conditions for friendship to bloom and be sustained and actually be contagious the way you were describing?
Yeah, it's kind of like a greenhouse, and there are environmental conditions that can be conducive to the easing of growth. Fosdick talked about the time that they had discovered, a 3-inch tall pine tree that was 100 yards above the tree line in the Rockies. And it had 27 rings. It was for 27 years, but it was only three inches tall. And the conditions did not keep it from growing, but were not conducive for it to grow easily. So there are environmental conditions that can be conducive to the human spirit, which is one of the rules of government, actually. I mean, one of the roles of government, to me, is provide, they can't make us grow, but they can provide conditions that are conducive to the growth of human relationships in loving one another. There are those environmental conditions that are conducive to that. Now, second part of that is, no matter how bad it gets, it doesn't prevent, growth. Here is Viktor Frankl in the middle of Auschwitz, finding the meaning of life, which is loving friendships and helping one another. All of his prior psychiatric stuff had been destroyed. And here he is finding in Auschwitz an entire new therapeutic way to deal with mankind, and that is what he called logotherapy, which is finding meaning in life and then living your life daily for that will fulfill that meaning. And so consequently, in the midst of terrible conditions, and we're having a tough time in America right now. I mean, the clouds have gathered, and there appears to be an imminent darkness that could be coming. And yet, there was when Jesus lived, this incredible Jewish peasant that literally turned the world upside down and inside out and right side up. Here's this Jewish peasant, and they're living in the midst of an occupied country. His homeland had been occupied since 63 BC. They had gone through rebellion. 5,000 Galileans had been crucified and hung on the roads that I'm sure were a part of his consciousness. He probably saw every day unbelievable acts of cruelty to women, to children, to everyone. And here's Jesus saying, in the Gospels, fear not, little flock, just this little group of people. It is your Father's good will and good pleasure to give you the kingdom, which is the overriding theme of the entire Bible, is the rule of God over all the earth, and that rule is the rule of love. That's the rule. This incredible invention. Think of the creator who invented the whole concept of loving friendship, invented it, and then surrendered himself slash herself, himself and herself, it's all together, surrendered to their own creation, and therefore experience all the hurt that you can have when you love someone and wish for their very best. What an astonishing source of all creation is this loving heart in the center of all that is and connected to all that is. And so we create and we make the barriers to those environments that could be conducive to a greater and greater deal. And that's why it's my hope, as you've heard me say, I think that, that the day will come. What is it, 1,000 years from now? If we do our job right now, 2,000 years, who knows? It took 700 years to build the cathedral at Cologne. These five little villages started out. It took 700 years. Who knows when? And when some little girl will turn to her mother and daddy and say, Mommy and Daddy, what is hate? And their mommy and daddy will look at each other and go, we don't know. What is hate? That the human race can come to the place where we've outgrown that. And that will be then an environment in which all of the greatest flower of humanity then grows without the obstacles that are there for us now. But we've got to conquer, and remember that in the midst of the occupation of evil in our midst, fear not, little flock. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Give it. So accept it.
Mac, you're such a giver of light and life to so many. I thought I would do something which I don't think I've done before on this podcast, which is ask you 4 questions that kind of follow a rhythm, but addressing slightly different people listening or likely listening. And if you could do your best to answer them in a sentence or two, that would be awesome. The first is, if you could encourage all those who, whatever their cause, are trying to change the world for good today, what would you say?
I would say this, Anne, that there is no greater cause for us to give our life to than the cause of caring and loving each and every single person. And we have to do that together. We cannot end up competing in caring. So, we've got to have a true submission to join together one army of love and caring. And, we're at a place where we want to say, well, okay, but it's got to be my army. That we've got to have, that's the reason why I say we've got to have some way to recognize that we're members of an army that says love works and love wins. And so, but we have to do it together, Ann. And I know it's one sentence, but I have to tell you, all the churches, I've looked at purpose statements of churches. I was around when they finally ended up, when they first started writing purpose statements, and I've never read a purpose statement, never, that had the first sentence say, working together with all other churches in a conscious commitment, to join together with them, working every day to join together with all other churches, we will bring the city to the love of God or to Jesus Christ or whatever. And I've never seen it. They always say, well, we're here to win it. Well, you've got, 350 other churches. You hadn't even won those churches to work together. So that's what I would say. We have to join together. Stop.
Yeah.
We've got to realize, yes, you're doing good, but we've got to do good together.
Amen. Preach, preacher. A second question, and you may have just answered it, but if you could encourage all those who call themselves Christians today, and perhaps especially in the American context, what would you say?
Well, I would say that we've got to, I'm imploring you to recognize that and to begin to live out each moment in this, that we are under the imperative to be doers of the word and not hearers only. We are called to be an army and not an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to confess that we are untrained and a lot of times unwilling to be trained and to live this faith out and to understand that we don't come together unless we follow one doctrine. And that one doctrine is what Peter said about his friend Jesus. He went about doing good. Let's stop trying to be good because we'll flunk, and let's begin to do good together. And doing good together means to care and love for each and every person as a precious creation of the source of our being.
Thank you, Mac. Two more questions. If you could encourage all young people today who I think are pretty discouraged and worried about the future for very understandable reasons, what would you tell them?
Well, here's what I would tell them, that you must envision a world where every single human being is loved and is safe and secure. You must get that vision into your sanctified imagination. And then let that vision rule your everydays, where you will be that loving person each and every day. And that's a discipline every day. And joy is a discipline. You're not going to just be happy by getting out in the field and get struck by happy. You have to literally undertake the discipline of living that kind of world today and live it into a new tomorrow. And so you have to say, what kind of world do we need? And write that down. If we need a world of loving, you live that today, and you can't live it alone. You have to live it together. And so that would be, what I would say. Sit down and imagine that. Oscar Wilde said, a map of the world that does not contain the country of utopia is not even worth glancing at. because it is the one country where humanity always has arrived, and having arrived there, goes on seeking a better and better country. And so consequently, we've got to sit down and really say, what kind of world is it? That happened in my life. What I just said, God, what kind of world do you want? Because I'm devoting my life now to that kind of world as best as I can. And with my brothers and sisters' help, it gets better and better.
Thanks, Mac. Okay, last question. Given our own friendship, and you know me pretty well by now, if you could just encourage me today, what would you say?
Here's exactly what I would say is for you to sit down and think yourself. Here are all of the things that I'm undertaking. I've got many oars in the water, and the oars all fit with the same boat. And how are all of these ways that I have given myself to be used, how do they come together that will help create that singularity of human beings who are committed to the faith that love does work and love does win? Can I sit down and draw how all of those now come together to do that? And then you keep that conscious, in your own heart, because you have a unity of purpose within you that has literally branched in many different ways. But if you can keep that conscious, then that will equalize the pressure, and you will become the bush that burns but is not consumed. Otherwise, if we can't see how by doing this, it is leading to a world in which human beings unite in the fact that love works and love wins. If I'm doing this over here and this over here and this over here, but I see how all together those literally fuel this movement, then as you do those deeds daily and undertake that, it's not like they're all taking a bite out of you. It's like they're adding, to the giftedness and the commitment that unifies those in an integrated matrix. But you have to be conscious of, by doing this, it is leading to that. And then that literally empowers you and feeds you. And it becomes this. You're already a burning bush, but this is the burning bush that burns but is not consumed. And so that's what I would say to encourage you. And I hope it does.
Thanks, Mac. Gonna make me cry in front of all these listeners. It does. Really, it goes without saying that, your friendship in the lives of thousands, I think tens of thousands now, has made the world a much softer and kinder and more humane and more sustainable place. And I know, or I hope you know, how lucky I feel to have had our life paths cross, and that you've stuck around to make mine a lot richer and sweeter. Thank you for sharing your own spirit and reflections on friendship today.
And you're so gracious. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Person Revolution podcast, which is as much a cultural compass for comment as it is an incarnate witness of the hope we explore in our pages. Like what you heard? Check out this podcast's intellectual seedbed at www.comment.org, where you'll find an artistic rendering of essays that shed light on the very real shadows afflicting the peace of our commons today, but also the many cracks of light. and consider joining us. You can write, you can read, you can host a comment supper in your neighborhood, or you can suggest questions that are pressing upon your desire to be an agent of grace and truth and gentleness and trustworthiness. We want to hear from you, and we need to learn from you. Write to us at comment@cardis.ca and expect a sincere exchange. We're honored to have you within our orbit and to pilgrim together toward wholeness in a world splintering against it. The Whole Person Revolution is hosted by Comment Magazine, produced and with original music by Allie Crummy, audience strategy by Matt Crummy. I'm Ann Snyder, and I'll see you next week.